Yeah. They talking this and that, but it's easy calling that bluff. They want that gimme, 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 but this isn't ABBA. I show up looking dapper, my mama's favorite rapper. She taught me never let a moment pass you, so I just run away, and I never look back. I hope it's what I'm hoping for. Run away, I got my backpack. Travel light, got my life inside a suitcase. Bought a ticket, I'm just trying to find a new place. What's the occasion, baby? Just another Tuesday. Okay, life feel like a movie. Okay, it's just another Tuesday. Say that you're lonely, then send me your ID. Got nothing to hold me right where I'm at. So come and hit closely, want you to be happy. You're tired of roaming right off the map. 1, 2, 3, go! She said I'm overzealous, she said I'm all but jealous. I probably would've said the same thing looking back. She said I'm out my melon, I never learned my lesson. I probably would've said the same thing looking back. Day one, yeah, you been my day one. When they hit me for the sauce, I gave them all that A1. Fake love, yeah, they give me fake love. You the only one I wanted with me on my way up. Can we just run away, and I never look back. I hope it's what I'm hoping for. Run away, I got my backpack. Travel light, got my life inside a suitcase. Bought a ticket, I'm just trying to find a new place. What's the occasion, baby? Just another Tuesday. Okay, life feel like a movie. Okay, it's just another Tuesday. Say that you're lonely, then send me your ID. Got nothing to hold me right where I'm at. So come and hit closely, want you to be happy. You're tired of roaming right off the map.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to part 2. If you missed part 1, well, you're missing an episode that will kind of make today confusing if you do not go back and listen to it, because what we did in part 1 is we started going through something that Shane created for his mortgage company that he went through with all of his people. And then we were talking about it and thought, man, this would be great for the collective. And so let's break this down and get into the details of essentially what is Ikigai. Did I say that right?
Yeah. And you know what? I just thought of this. At the end of the day, you know what Ikigai is? It's our cheat code.
Yeah.
When you meet a person, and I've always had a dream, and I need to just do it, to live in Southern California. Like, I'm a beach, like avocado toast, like riding a longboard kind of guy. And my dad's from that area. And I always think, like, there's a person in your mind. We all have this. And I'm curious what yours is. When you go, I want to go, and there's a person, and you go, man, I can't wait till I'm like 65. And I'm surfing and I'm doing these things. And that is it, man. That's what we're talking about. Like, how do you get to that? It's because you find yourself in this state of Ikigai, and it's not by chance. You don't just find yourself there. You put yourself there, and then you stay there as much as you can. And so the premise of this all, for those of you who haven't yet listened to part 1, is the question I asked myself as I reflected back on 24. I looked at 25. I thought about 26. How do I help my team make last year their worst year ever? And what could we do that costs us no money to do that, to guarantee that? And it's this concept of outworking your opportunities. And so if you're going to outwork your opportunities, we're all given the same potential in this industry. You get your hours in real estate or lending, you're equal playing field, especially after COVID. What you do with that is that outwork. It's that hustle. It's that Mamba mentality. But then as I started thinking about when I was at my worst in this industry, it's when I was outworking opportunity, but I wasn't in that place, that state, because I hadn't focused on all 4 quadrants of Ikigai. And so with the goal being, how do we make last year your worst year ever? Well, you've got to outwork the opportunities that have been provided to all of us. You've got to find the state of Ikigai, which we went over on part 1. And then you got to live into either the identity that you're not leveraging well, or you need to get out of the identity you're in and you need to live into that identity that you've always wanted. When you think about that person that you want to become, like, what are they doing differently than you're currently doing today? And so I broke this down into 5 identities that are, I believe, are kind of the personas of the mortgage. Like, if you meet somebody and you bump into an LO, they're going to fall into one of these 5 categories. And then as we were talking, I refined it. It's really 4 identities in like season 1, phase 1. And then when you get to phase 2, there's a completely different identity that really kind of takes over. You're no longer one of the 4. You're now this different person. And that's where I feel like I'm at in my life now. And so that's a really exciting process for, and then there's a phase 3 that we're going to get into as well. And so let's just really quickly go through these identities. And one of the challenges that people have, and I told this to the room and I'm going to tell it to this room, I'm not talking to you. A lot of times, when you're not where you want to be, and like you say, well, you know what? You're probably just not working as hard as you should. You go, who's Kyle think he is to talk to me like that? The only person talking to you is you.
That's right.
So if you feel like, when I kind of like go through these, if you're like, yeah, right, Shane, like first one example, the part-timer, right? And what does it mean to be a part-timer, right? Well, the part-timer, they balance a lot of things. They're your mom that also happens to be in lending, right? And maybe, that person's spouse doesn't understand and appreciate how impactful this business can be if you do it full time.
Yeah.
Specialize in something, which really means they don't have time to do all the things they should be doing. They're going to leverage their personal network for lead generation because they don't have the time or capacity to build new networks, right? So they're really capped on their potential, right? They're oftentimes a difficult coworker because they have a lot of questions. Like, hey, when is that meeting again? Hey, where's that new guideline? Because they're just not in flow with the industry, right? And again, this isn't a judgment call. I was the part-time LO, full-time fireman. I lived into that identity.
Yeah.
And I had a business coach I paid a lot of money to who finally said, Shane, what are you doing? You're jumping over hundreds to pick up pennies. And it was probably jumping over millions to pick up hundreds. And why are you? And come to find out, my identity, I identified as a part-time originator without actually understanding what that meant. Again, there's going to be somebody on this that's going to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm in a place in life. I'm a little bit older. Like, I've made my money. And for that person, I would challenge you. It's not the hours worked. It's the work done in the hours. How can, like, if you want to be a 20-hour week LO, I guarantee you, I challenge you to get more out of that time. Because what if you could make 20% more revenue without increasing your hours? Would you say yes to that?
Right.
Who would say no to that, right? So again, like, we're not here to say that the part-time LO is the wrong identity to have. First and foremost, step 1 is, what identity are you? Right? And that's the first one. So first identity that I lived into this was the part-time loan officer. Second identity was the adaptability challenged LO.
Yeah.
And you can also have multiple identities. You can be like, oh yeah, I'm kind of a little bit of both of those. And that we found that exercise with our team to be true. This person, they struggle to adopt to changing market conditions and new technologies. They're constantly behind the 8 ball, right? They may chase trends they don't fully understand or commit to. Like, they're doing things because they're seeing their competition do it. And they're like, crap, that top producer just got on the webinar bandwagon. I better start teaching webinars. But it's not because they want to. It's because they feel like they have to. They're going to blame external factors for a lack of success often. The reality is that they're the reason they're not successful. It's not because of rates, the market, because I can find somebody who's doing more this last year than they did the year before, regardless of market conditions.
Yep.
They typically have a difficult time identifying and sticking to a consistent and effective strategy. They're all over the place, right? They are also oftentimes extremely deep down, hard to hear, insecure. They're like, and that's because they're like, I don't think my strategy is good enough, and they're not doing it. They're not doing it well enough, long enough, consistently enough to actually be able to truly say that. But they say that
Yeah.
If they go, I'm not good enough at video. What's Kyle doing? That's an insecurity, right? And I had somebody in the room that said, I don't like the word insecure. And I'm like, well, you shouldn't, right? But you should be honest if that's where you are.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you're insecure and you leave that state, that's awesome. If you stay there, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Right. It's like when I was a fireman, we went through this training on nuclear disasters. And they have this whole concept of like time, distance, and shielding. Like if there's some radiation, you can stay there for a short period of time with no impact on you long term. But if you linger there too long, you'll start to feel that over time. And years down the road, you'll get cancer or something will come up, and it was because you stayed in that bad state for too long. And that's what the adaptability challenge LOs do day in and day out.
Well, and so we probably should have done this at the beginning of this. I think we should pause right here in the middle of these four and talk about your EQ, your emotional intelligence. Because when you start trying to tell people who you think they are, the highly emotionally intelligent people aren't concerned with what your opinions are, but they're listening because they do want to be better. The low emotional intelligent people are the ones that are instantly offended. They're instantly telling you how stupid you are. Shane, you're a moron. What do you know? You know, who are you to tell me how I am or who I am or how I should do things? And so I think we need to take a breath. And the listeners, the viewers, you need to do a little self-guided tour inside of your own mind and ask yourself, like, what is my posture listening to this episode so far? Is Shane making you mad? Is Shane frustrating you? Is Shane revealing something that may be true about you, but because your inability to hear the truth, you're already finding yourself on the defensive? Because we watch people all the time, like, fight with people on the internet. And it's just such low emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
I have a guy that I went to high school with that he's been like a Mr. Olympia and he's got millions of followers. And he put something on social media a few days ago about how, like, essentially, like, you're super ignorant if you cuss. And then he even went into, as I've noticed who cusses, he like started throwing out like overweight people tend to cuss. You know, this group of people tend, and bro, the comments are unbelievable. And I fit into like 4 of his metrics of people that cuss, in his opinion. And I'm just laughing at all these people. They're like, who are you? How dare you? F you. And it's like, man, how do people live their lives on such edge that they can be set off by some stupid, ignorant post on social media? We've got to figure out how to deepen our ability to have emotional intelligence, because otherwise we never grow and we can't have intellectual conversations with people, because the moment somebody disagrees with me, I'm so insecure about myself, I have to fight them instead of open my mind and listen.
Here's a reality.
A whole nother episode.
Oh, this is a whole nother call. Here's the reality. I'm gonna say this, and again, the great thing about you who are listening to this and you're having a negative reaction to me is I make no money from this. I gain nothing from you being unhappy or happy. Well, yeah. I think if you do better, I gain, because I want people to win.
Sure.
I want people to be successful. The reality is when you have negative responses to things that shouldn't impact you at all, it's because you are not in love with yourself in a healthy way. Like, Kyle, you love your spouse. And let's just say I bumped in, I don't know you at all. You've never met me, and I'm just some prick driving a pickup truck in Fort Worth. And I look at you and I go, man, your wife is ugly. Like, you don't believe that at all.
Right.
Now you might be fired up because I'm speaking negatively about your spouse, but you're like, deep down in your heart of hearts, you're like, my wife is like the most gorgeous woman I've ever met. Because you love her. You love her. The problem is we don't have this this healthy self-image. And so when somebody says people who swear are stupid, years ago, I would have been like, oh, forget this guy. What a loser.
Right.
Now I'm like,
Yeah.
I'd probably like to swear a little bit less, but sometimes for me, like when I'm coaching my people, if I have to turn on the regulator, I'm not as effective in my role. And I learned actually swearing from firemen, and most of them had been military and some of them had been Navy SEALs. And they are some of the most intelligent humans on the planet who can micromanage and multitask better than anyone else. So I know that's not true, right? Anyways, we're kind of going on a tangent, but the reality is what you need to do is, as we're identifying this and going through this, first and foremost, feel what you're feeling. Don't ignore it. If what I'm saying is pissing you off, the second thing, feel it. I'm pissed off by what Shane said. Secondly, ask yourself why.
Yeah.
It's not because of me.
Yeah.
Like I'm in a business development group, and the guy is awesome. He's from Australia. It's really hard to not like something being said by somebody with an Australian accent.
It's so
like,
true.
oh, crikey, man, you're totally fat and ugly. And it's like, it's so cool, right? And that was a terrible accent. I apologize to all my Aussies out there. And he said something, and then I'm like, I started getting irritated. And then I'm like, why am I getting irritated? And I had to kind of process that with first I'm like, I'm irritated. And then I had to process why I was getting irritated. And so I think it's just very healthy to feel your feelings and then have a conversation with yourself about why you're feeling what you're feeling. The reality is you probably don't like yourself enough. You probably have an insecurity there that it's time to address that. It's time to get healthy. It's time to get right with yourself.
And so to tie a bow on this, I think you just gave two things: feel it, ask why you're feeling it. And then in a healthy way, the third step would then be express appropriately.
Yep.
Right. So like if you did say something that made me mad, and then I begin to process it and I go, man, I think I want to talk to Shane about this. Well, then now through process, I can express it in a healthy way. And then if you and I are both emotionally intelligent, we can have an adult conversation. What most people do is they express first before they feel it. The moment that emotion shows, they instantly jump to screw you, F you. And then that night, they're probably like, I probably shouldn't have said that to Shane like that.
That's not even their primary emotion. That's just the emotion that they're able to interpret.
Sure.
Like the primary emotions are sadness, like anger, happiness. Yep. Like there's a couple, right? The reality is, like you and I had a conversation last week. I'm like, dude, like we had a call and you weren't on the call. I was on the call. And I'm like, dude, what happened? Right. Yeah. And like, well, I canceled. I'm like, I didn't see. And again, like we could have, if we were extremely insecure, I could have been super pissed that you missed the call. You could have been super pissed that I accused you of missing the call.
Sure.
Right. And it's so it's really important to just like really like yourself, be comfortable with who you are. It's not that you're perfect. It's not that you have an arrogance about it, but like love yourself, you know, because if you love other people and other people say something about them, you're going to defend them, but you're going to do it in a cool way. And you're going to be like, that's not true. That person's incredible. Well, right.
Golly, dude, the pastor is I'm trying not to let
fight
the pastor
it. Yeah. We got to do a whole nother podcast.
All right. I'll save it.
All right. Let's get back into this. Number three. So we went
remind them of one.
Yeah, we went through the part-timer. We went through the adaptability challenge. And what you might be saying is the adaptability challenge and the part-timer are kind of the same. And in many ways they are. But again, like there are part-time people who do this very, very well. I was part-time and I wasn't adaptability challenged, right? Like there was no ego there.
I think there's also some full-time people that really embody a part-time person.
Well, 100%. And again, like the part-time identity, I didn't identify a specific set of hours that person worked.
Sure.
You could identify as a part-time person and waste 50 hours a week. You could say you're full-time and really be impactfully working 10 hours a week. So it's not really the hours worked, it's the work done in the hours. That's so third is the old school loan officer.
You're my boy, Blue.
Now, some of these people, they've been defending and fighting for the right to stay old school now for years, and they're exhausted fighting. And I'm here to tell you that I love you. I will hire you. You are my people. You are great. Like, and this is the person that relies very heavily on personal relationships. They're the ones who are going to be belly to belly, as we like to call it back in the day. They're going to call you and forget that they like didn't leave, like they didn't hang up the phone, and then the voicemail is going to be the phone in their pocket. But you love that person. They focus on like very local market knowledge. They're the person that when you like, you want the old school teammate, because when you say in your team chat, hey, does anybody know if we have an investor that can do the following? They will know, and they will be right. They're the one who's like, oh, well, this is why you can't go that. They know their guidelines, right? They may be slower to adopt new technologies, but they excel in personalized service.
Yep.
Like the loyalty factor with their clients is through the roof.
Yep.
They often, and this is a client base they've typically built over years. Now, they have a ceiling as well, like the adaptability challenge, because old school only has a hard time scaling. Typically, right. And what will happen is then somebody will say, well, Shane, that's not true. I know a guy down the street who did 300 million last year, and like all of his business was, teaching personal classes, belly to bellies. And then I say, well, yeah, that guy has 12 staff members. Yeah. So old school scales, but it scales at a very high cost. Yep. It's really hard to scale old school without spending a lot of money and bringing on a lot of staff and spending a lot of time. And again, I have been that person. When I retired from the fire department and went full time, I already had an LOA on my team. And then as I started to get more successful and grow, and I hit top 1% a couple times in a couple years in a row, I hired a second LOA. And we were old school. We were calling everybody every week. We were doing very all personal text messages. We were meeting in person. People were bringing docs in. My LOAs were on the phone with the agents all the time. People love the process. I didn't love the cost of the process, right? And those people, their teams were gutted in the last couple of years, or they took no profit, or their company took a significant loss to keep them on board and intact as they were.
Right.
Now, again, I love these people. I think that they're the most reliable, right? Like these are the people that every day, if they say they're showing up at 7:30 with their briefcase, they show up at 7:30.
That's right.
And again, like what you might be saying is, yeah, but that's not true, Shane. I have an old school guy on my team and he's always late. He's old school adaptability challenged, or he's old school part-time. He's not just old school. He's got another competing identity that's actually very harmful to being like the best old school LO he or she could possibly be.
Well, and I think we have to be careful when we talk about generalities the way we are with these four types of mortgage people. It's so easy to want to go, yeah, but I know a guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, the one guy that you know, like that doesn't dispel everything that we're saying. Right? We're not calling this 100% black and white. There is no room for gray. But by and large, this is how each of these groups operates.
And when you say to me, I would love to have somebody reach out to me in private message, say, hey, I've got a guy that contradicts. I'd love to have that happen. I want to then talk to that person, because the reality is when I sit down, I go, hey, Kyle, Susie was listening to my podcast and I identified 4 different types of loan originators. And I said that the part-time originator is kind of hard to be a coworker with, et cetera, et cetera. And she said, you're the best part-time LO ever. And I interview that person, come to find out it's not all rosy in part-time land, right?
Right.
Their financials are a mess. They're actually, when they go, I work 20 hours, and I go, do you really? How many hours did you work yesterday? When did you leave, disengage from your personal life, and then re-engage with your personal life? Oh, that was 7.5 hours. That doesn't seem like part-time. Right. So I would argue that although these are general in nature, this is human nature that we're actually talking about.
Yeah. And
these characteristics maybe all live in all of us, and some are just better at pulling different levers.
That's it.
Okay. The fourth identity. Last one, the modern loan officer, the guy or gal that every company says they want to hire. This is the person that leverages AI and technology to build relationships for lead generation, customer retention. They use cloud-based technology to constantly market to a large group of different audiences. In theory,
Yeah.
they focus on building a strong personal brand through digital platforms and social media. They emphasize continuous learning and adaptation to market trends. This person typically, if they haven't been, many of these people haven't been, and this one, I think there are some nuances to this. Many of these people have not been in the industry a long time. And so they don't necessarily, having not gone through good, bad seasons, they don't have a depth of experience in how to navigate different markets.
Yeah.
They oftentimes think that they can do your job better than you because all they've experienced is a specific trend.
Yep.
And so they can be hard. If you're a branch manager, regional manager, a lot of times these modern LOs, they get a little bit of success and they're coming to you for an instant raise, right? Because they're doing so much of the work, not appreciating a lot of the old school blocking and tackling that takes place in that process, that transaction.
Yeah.
They have a hard time sometimes appreciating all the work a processor does on a loan. They're just getting title docs. They're just uploading conditions, right? Not appreciating and understanding because they don't have that breadth of knowledge and experience. Now, they're great because their ceiling can be really, really high.
Right.
The challenge with them is oftentimes they can't go from concepts to community with much effectiveness. They can build a great webinar. They can build out a really cool CRM. They can attract a 20-something to reach out and engage online. But if I said to you, Kyle, who has a lot of old school traits in a good way, and I get a 21-year-old LO who's got 20,000 followers on Instagram, built great webinars, owns their own design CRM, and I said, guys, I'm going to put you both in a room with 100 real estate agents. The first one that can create a meaningful relationship that converts to coffee, and by meaningful, like they actually share their story and get slightly emotional, I will give $10,000 to. You're winning 99 times out of 100.
Maybe 100.
Maybe 100, right? Like
Yeah.
the modern LO typically has a hard time with the empathy, the EQ, these different kind of more old school things. Like they have a hard time just talking to people in general because they've oftentimes been behind a screen. It's a lot of times they got into the business during COVID. Things were very different.
And so what we're excited about, as I chew a piece of ice, I don't think that's what you're supposed to do.
Bad time to segue back in
when you're doing a podcast. We want you guys to think about, where do you see yourself? Because what we're going to break down in future parts is, we didn't create all four of these things to say this one sucks less, this one's the best, you should all try to be this one. There are positives and negatives to all four of these. Like there are things that a part-time person does that should probably be adopted by some full-time people. And so we're going to break down the pros and cons of each of these in future parts. And so it's super important for you to be able to go, you know what? I kind of see myself as the modern loan officer, but I don't love to adapt forwards or backwards based on certain things. And so that's the goal, Shane, so that then, right, without that understanding, you cannot grow, you cannot get better, you cannot identify your potential blind spots. And so that's got to be the homework assignment at the end of this episode.
Yeah, because again, like you're watching part 2, which means we hope you watched part 1. We started by talking through the concept of outworking the opportunities and finding that place of Ikigai. And so what we want, again, this is building on that. This is not separate from that. To be the best originator possible, you have to be a combination of a few different identities. Now, what you typically can't do is if you are a football fan that has always loved football, you live and breathe football, it wouldn't make sense to say, stop being a football fan and start being a baseball fan. Very different sports.
Yep.
But I could say, hey, if 20% of your time you focused on baseball, if that helped you make 50% more revenue, would you be willing to make that sacrifice? If I told you the best sports writer actually doesn't just write about one sport, how does that make you feel? Because the reality is, when we look at it, the modern LO has a higher ceiling than an old school LO, but the old school LO has a far stronger community and relationship opportunity with people than the modern one does. So you should carry both those personas. To your point, done right, the part-time originator is far more efficient with their time than the others. They have to be, because they have less time to do the tasks needed.
Right.
Now, what I would say is the one that you really want to avoid is the adaptability challenge.
Right.
And this, again, it's like, if you're there, don't get angry, get different. Right? Think about that and ask yourself that and say, what do I want to do? Because when we sat down as a group this weekend, I asked the team to think about the personality, the identity that is market resilient, relevant in any time and place, and financially successful. And then stays in Ikigai. Because if you do those things, but you're not in a zone where you're good at it, it makes you money, like you're blessing others, right? And you enjoy it, you're going to burn out very, very quickly. And we've all seen those people. Now, one thing we didn't do that you're probably thinking is, okay, like, I've identified I'm this, I want to move towards this. Well, the way to change your identity is not to identify yourself. It's to figure out what you are, figure out what you want to become, and then change your behavior.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to get into are the actions of each of these identities. We're going to really drill into the things that top producers who are, more modern are doing that's super effective. We're going to get into, if you're an old school LO and you're doing this the right way, what are those skills, those tasks, those daily actions that matter that you're doing that are working in this market and have worked in other markets? So we're going to really drill down, because then that fourth part is bringing it all together. Yep. It's okay. I'm a more modern LO than I am old school, but like, I've had a hard time really competing against the guy or gal who's entrenched in this market is very old school. And some of those skills that I really need to adopt are more of those old school skills. And I want to do it in a more efficient way. I need to start doing the following every Monday, the following every Wednesday, to really start to like gain that momentum and shift my identity, not change who I am, shift my identity. And so we're going to go through that on part 3 of this.
So go do your homework. This has been part 2. Thank you guys for hanging. We'll see you on part 3 whenever you choose to watch and or listen to it. See you guys.